I, 26F, stood there in a dress that cost more than my first car, looking at the man I was about to marry. His name was Mark, and I thought he was the beginning and end of my world. The church was filled with flowers that smelled like promises, and the light coming through the stained glass windows painted us in gentle colors. I felt like I was floating. Every beat of my heart was a drumroll for the rest of my life. My sister Amelia stood beside me as my maid of honor. Her dress was a soft blue, the color of a calm sea. I remember squeezing her hand just before the music started, and she squeezed back. It was a perfect day, or so I believed for the next 20 minutes. The ceremony was beautiful. The officiant spoke about love and partnership, and his words felt like they were written just for us. Mark's eyes were locked on mine. They were full of what I thought was adoration, a deep and unwavering love that made my bones feel settled. He took my hands, and his were warm and steady. I felt safe. I felt chosen. I felt like the luckiest woman alive. When it was his turn to say his vows, he began with the traditional words, his voice clear and strong. He promised to honor and cherish me, in sickness and in health. Every word landed softly in my heart, a foundation being laid for our future. Then he paused. He took a deep breath, and a small, almost secretive smile touched his lips. He was going off script. I thought it was going to be a sweet, personal addition. Something just for me. My own smile widened in anticipation. He looked at me, and then his eyes flickered, just for a second, to my left. He was looking at Amelia, my sister. She was standing right there, holding my bouquet. His gaze returned to me, but it was different now. It was like he was looking through me. "Clara," he said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "I promise to love you." He paused again, and the silence stretched for just a beat too long. The air grew thick. "And I promise to love you both forever." My mind snagged on the word. Both. Why would he say both? I thought it was a mistake, a slip of the tongue. Maybe he meant to say something about loving my family, about accepting them as his own. But then he did something that shattered that hope into a million tiny pieces. His eyes darted to Amelia again, and he winked. It was a quick, almost imperceptible movement. A tiny conspiratorial gesture that was not meant for me. It was a secret passed between them, right there at the altar. Right in front of God and everyone we knew. The word both echoed in my head. The wink burned itself into my memory. Suddenly, the church felt cold. The flowers smelled sickly sweet. My perfect day cracked down the middle, a deep, ugly fissure running right through it. Amelia's face was a mask of polite neutrality, but I saw it. I saw the flicker of a smile she tried to hide. I saw the blush that crept up her neck. She knew what he meant. They both did. And I was the only one who was not in on the joke. I must have gone pale, because my mother, sitting in the front row, leaned forward with a worried look. I tried to pull myself together. The officiant was waiting for me to say my vows. The whole church was waiting. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. My own words came out, but they tasted like ash in my mouth. I promised to love and honor him, but the words were hollow. They were lies. How could I promise forever to a man who had just promised his forever to someone else, too? The rest of the ceremony was a blur. He put the ring on my finger, and it felt heavy, like a shackle. I put his ring on his finger, and my hand trembled. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife and said, "You may kiss the bride," Mark leaned in. His kiss was not for me. It was a performance for the crowd. I could feel it. His lips were warm, but his heart felt a million miles away. All I could see when I closed my eyes was that wink. That horrible, life-altering wink. As we walked back down the aisle, people were cheering and smiling. They saw a happy couple, the picture of new beginnings. All I saw was the end of everything I had believed in. Mark was holding my hand, but his grip felt possessive, not protective. I glanced at Amelia, who was following behind us. She was smiling, a bright, beaming smile for the wedding photographer, but her eyes met mine for a fleeting moment. There was no sympathy in them. There was triumph. And in that moment, standing in my beautiful white dress, surrounded by joy and celebration, I had never felt so utterly and completely alone. I lost it right there, not in a way anyone could see, but inside, where it mattered. A switch flipped. The woman who had walked into that church full of love and hope was gone. In her place was someone else, someone colder, someone who knew she had just become the star of a tragedy she never auditioned for. The reception was held in a grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers and tables draped in white linen. Everything was exquisitely planned, every detail a testament to months of careful preparation. People were laughing, music was playing, and champagne was flowing. It was supposed to be the best party of my life. Instead, it felt like a wake. I was a ghost at my own wedding feast. I moved through the room, smiling until my cheeks ached, accepting congratulations that felt like condolences. Mark was by my side, his hand firmly on the small of my back. He was playing the part of the devoted husband perfectly. He laughed at guest jokes, he thanked everyone for coming, and he kept looking at me with what was supposed to pass for adoration. But I knew better now. It was all a lie. Every smile, every touch, every whispered, "I love you," was a performance. I was his co-star in a play I didn't know we were in. "Are you okay, honey?" he asked, his voice a low murmur against my ear as we stood near the towering wedding cake. "You seem a little quiet." I looked at him, really looked at him. I tried to see the man I had fallen in love with, the man who made me feel safe and cherished, but all I saw was a stranger with a terrible secret in his eyes. "I'm fine," I said, my voice flat, just a little overwhelmed. It was the truth, just not the way he thought. "Just relax and enjoy it," he said, giving my back a reassuring squeeze. "This is our day." Our day. The words were a bitter pill. I watched him as he turned to greet his uncle. He was so charming, so effortlessly confident. No one would ever suspect. No one would ever guess that just an hour ago, he had pledged his love to two women at the altar. My eyes found Amelia across the room. She was talking to some of our cousins, holding a glass of champagne, looking radiant in her blue dress. She caught me looking and gave me a small, questioning smile as if to ask, "What's wrong?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk over there and demand to know what was going on. But what would I say? "Did my husband just wink at you during our vows?" It sounded insane. It sounded like something a jealous, hysterical bride would imagine. They would all say I was just stressed. They would tell me I was seeing things. Mark had already set the stage for that. He would just deny it, laugh it off as a joke, and I would be the crazy one. I needed to be smart. I needed to be calm. I excused myself, saying I needed to use the restroom. I walked away from the noise and the fake smiles, my heels clicking on the polished marble floor. In the quiet of the ladies' lounge, I leaned against the cool countertop and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her eyes were wide with a fear I had never known before. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the panic that was starting to bubble up inside me. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head. Maybe I did misunderstand. Maybe it was just a strange, awkward joke. A terrible, poorly timed joke. I clung to that possibility like a lifeline. I wanted it to be true more than anything. I wanted to go back out there and find that it was all a simple mistake, that my perfect day wasn't broken after all. When I returned to the ballroom, the band had started playing a slow song. Mark was waiting for me. It was time for our first dance. He took my hand and led me to the center of the floor. The lights dimmed and a spotlight found us. He pulled me close, his arm wrapping around my waist. "There you are," he whispered. I was getting worried. "I just needed a minute," I replied, resting my head on his shoulder as we began to sway to the music. I closed my eyes, trying to feel the love I had felt just this morning. I tried to pretend the wink never happened. "I love you, Clara," he said softly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words were stuck in my throat. We danced in silence for a few moments, the soft melody of the song washing over us. Then he spoke again, his voice barely audible. "She looked beautiful today, didn't she?" My blood ran cold. I knew exactly who he was talking about. He didn't say her name, but he didn't have to. I pulled back slightly so I could see his face. "Who?" I asked, my voice trembling. A shadow of annoyance crossed his features. "Amelia, of course," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Your sister. She looked really beautiful." I just stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mistake. It was real. He was thinking about my sister during our first dance as husband and wife. The spotlight felt like an interrogation lamp. The smiling faces of our friends and family blurred into a gallery of silent witnesses. He had just confirmed my worst fear without even realizing it. The wink was not a slip. It was a message, and I had just intercepted it. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of forced smiles and hollow gestures. I cut the cake with him, our hands clasped together on the knife. The sweetness of the frosting was nauseating. I tossed the bouquet, and for a horrible, sinking moment, I was afraid Amelia would catch it. Thankfully, one of our cousins did. I watched Mark dance with his mother and then with mine. He was the perfect son, the perfect son-in-law, a complete and utter fraud. Later, I saw him talking to Amelia near the bar. I was on the other side of the room, trapped in a conversation with a distant relative, but I couldn't take my eyes off them. They were standing close, closer than they should have been. Mark leaned in to say something, and Amelia laughed. It was a genuine, unguarded laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from her all day. He touched her arm, a casual, fleeting gesture, but it lingered for a second too long. It was a touch that spoke of familiarity, of intimacy. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the back of a chair to steady myself. This was not new. This was not a sudden development. The wink was not the beginning. It was just the first time I had been allowed to see the truth. How long had this been going on? How many secret looks, secret touches, secret conversations had I missed? I felt like a fool. A blind, trusting fool who had walked willingly into a trap laid by the two people I loved most in the world. When it was finally time to leave, to drive off to our hotel for our wedding night, I felt a deep, chilling dread. Mark was all smiles as we ran through a shower of rice thrown by our guests. He opened the car door for me, the perfect gentleman. As he got into the driver's seat, he turned to me, his face glowing. "Well, Mrs. Evans," he said, "we did it." I looked at him, at the man who was now my husband, the man who had shattered my world and didn't even have the decency to look sorry about it. "Yes," I said, my voice empty. "We did." The drive to the hotel was silent. Mark seemed to think it was a comfortable silence, the easy quiet of a couple who had just pledged their lives to each other. He had no idea it was the silence of a heartbreaking. He had no idea that the woman sitting next to him was already plotting her escape. The wedding was over, but my war was just beginning. Our hotel suite was opulent, with a 4-poster bed strewn with rose petals and a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. It was meant to be a romantic paradise, the perfect start to our honeymoon. To me, it felt like a prison cell. Mark was buzzing with energy, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "Look at this place," he exclaimed, walking over to the large window that overlooked the city lights. "They really went all out for us." I stood by the door, my hand still on the knob, feeling frozen. I couldn't bring myself to step further into the room. It felt like crossing a threshold into a life I no longer wanted. He turned back to me, his smile faltering slightly as he took in my expression. "Hey, what's wrong? You've been quiet all night. Is it just wedding jitters?" I finally let go of the doorknob and walked slowly towards the sitting area, avoiding the ridiculously romantic bed. I needed to know. I needed to hear him explain it. I couldn't spend another second in this suffocating uncertainty. Mark, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. At the church, during your vows, you said you would love us both. He let out a short, nervous laugh. He ran a hand through his hair. Oh, that. Yeah, I guess that was a little weird, huh? A little weird? I repeated, my voice rising slightly. You promised to love my sister forever at our wedding. And then you winked at her. Babe, it was a joke, he said, walking towards me, his hands held out in a placating gesture. You know how I feel about Amelia. She's like a sister to me, too. I was just including her in the moment. It was meant to be sweet, like I'm not just marrying you, I'm joining your family. His explanation was smooth. It was practiced. It was the kind of plausible denial that could make someone doubt their own sanity. For a fleeting second, I almost believed him. I wanted to believe him. But the wink wasn't sweet. It was a secret. It didn't feel sweet, Mark, I said, shaking my head. It felt like a secret, and she knew what it meant. I saw her face. His expression hardened. The charming smile vanished, replaced by a look of frustration. This was the real Mark, I realized. The one who appeared when he wasn't getting his way. Oh, come on, Clara. Don't do this. Not tonight. You're being overly sensitive. You're stressed from the wedding, and you're reading into things that aren't there. He was gaslighting me. He was turning it around, making me the problem. My sensitivity, my stress, my imagination. It was a classic tactic, and it was working. I could feel my resolve begin to crumble under the weight of his dismissal. And then at the reception, I pushed on, my voice weaker now. You told me how beautiful she looked. You were touching her arm at the bar. She's your sister. Am I not allowed to think she looks nice? Am I not allowed to touch my sister-in-law's arm? He shot back, his voice rising in exasperation. My God, Clara, this is ridiculous. You're creating drama out of nothing. Are you trying to ruin our wedding night? There it was. The accusation. I was the one ruining things. I was the one causing the problem. He had expertly flipped the script, and now I was the villain in our story. I felt a surge of helpless anger. He was so good at this. How many times had he done this before, twisting situations until I was the one apologizing? I'm not trying to ruin anything, I whispered, tears pricking at my eyes. I hated myself for crying, for showing him weakness. I'm just trying to understand what happened today. He sighed, the sound heavy with theatrical patience. He came over and wrapped his arms around me. His embrace felt wrong, constricting. There's nothing to understand, he said, his voice soft again, trying to soothe me. I love you. Only you. That was a stupid, clumsy joke, and I'm sorry if it upset you. Can we please just forget about it and enjoy our night? We're married now. I let him hold me, but I was rigid in his arms. My mind was racing. He was right about one thing. We were married now. That was a legal fact. A binding contract. And he had breached it before the ink was even dry. Forgetting about it was not an option. But fighting with him now in this hotel room was pointless. He would just deny, deflect, and gaslight me until I was exhausted and confused. I needed proof. I needed something more than a wink and a feeling in my gut. He was counting on me being an emotional, hysterical bride. He was counting on me doubting myself. I would not give him the satisfaction. I pulled away from him and forced a small, fragile smile. Okay, I said quietly. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just tired and emotional. Relief washed over his face. He had won, or so he thought. That's my girl, he said, kissing my forehead. Now, how about that champagne? I watched him pop the cork, the cheerful sound echoing the hollowness inside me. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to me. I raised it to my lips, the bubbles fizzing against my tongue. I made a toast. Not out loud, but to myself. A silent vow to uncover the truth. The honeymoon had just begun, but my marriage was already over. I just had to prove it. The week in Hawaii was supposed to be idyllic. It was anything but. I lived in a state of hypervigilance, watching Mark's every move, analyzing his every word. He seemed to believe he had successfully smoothed things over on our wedding night. He was attentive and affectionate, constantly trying to draw me into the romantic fantasy of our honeymoon. He booked sunset dinners, couples massages, and snorkeling trips. On the surface, we looked like any other happy newlyweds. But I was an actress now, playing a role. I smiled for the pictures he took. I held his hand as we walked along the beach. I let him kiss me. But every touch made my skin crawl. Every "I love you" felt like an insult. I was a detective trapped in a romantic comedy, and the crime scene was my own life. His phone, which had always been an open book, was now guarded. He kept it with him at all times. If he left it on the nightstand while he showered, he placed it face down. A small change, but it screamed guilt. One afternoon, while he was napping by the pool, I saw my chance. His phone was on the small table next to his lounge chair. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for it. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. I knew his passcode. Or I thought I did. I typed in the familiar numbers. His birthday. Access denied. I tried again, using my birthday. Access denied. My heart sank. He had changed it. When? Why? I tried a few more combinations, anniversaries, old addresses. Nothing worked. The phone displayed a message. Try again in 1 minute. I had failed. I quickly placed the phone back on the table exactly as I had found it, just as he started to stir. "Hey," he said sleepily, stretching his arms above his head. "Did I fall asleep?" "For a little while," I said, trying to keep my voice light, pretending to be absorbed in my book. My hands were still trembling behind the cover. That night, he was on his phone while I was getting ready for dinner. I watched his reflection in the mirror. He was smiling, that same secret smile from the wedding. He was texting someone. "Who are you texting?" I asked, my tone as casual as I could manage. He looked up, startled. The smile vanished. "Oh, just my mom," he said quickly. "She was asking how the trip is going." "Tell her we say hi," I said, turning back to the mirror to apply my lipstick. My hand was steady now. The lie was so easy for him. It was effortless. That scared me more than anything. A few days later, a new opportunity presented itself. We were at a luau, and he had a few too many Mai Tais. He was loose and jovial, his guard completely down. We got back to the hotel room, and he collapsed onto the bed, falling asleep almost instantly, fully clothed. And there, on the nightstand, was his phone. This time, I was calmer. I picked it up. I didn't try the passcode. I knew it wouldn't work. Instead, I remembered something. His laptop. He had brought it with him for work emergencies, he had said. We had a shared cloud account where our photos and some documents were synced. Maybe, just maybe, his messages were synced there too. I quietly opened his laptop. The password for that was one we shared. I held my breath as it booted up. I opened the messaging app. And there it was. His entire message history, synced from his phone. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I scrolled down, looking for one name. Amelia. The conversation thread was long. It went back months, years. I started reading. My hands grew cold. My vision blurred with tears, but I blinked them away. I had to see. I had to know everything. The messages were full of inside jokes, shared memories, and pet names for each other. They talked every day, all day. They complained to each other about their lives. He complained about me. He told her I was too needy, too emotional. She told him he deserved to be happy. They were a team. A secret, two-person team, and I was the person they were a team against. I scrolled back to the weeks leading up to the wedding. They had been planning, not just the affair, but their future. Amelia, are you sure you can go through with this? It feels so wrong. Mark, we have to. It's the only way. Her inheritance is tied up until she's married. Once we have access to it, we can get our own place. Just be patient. A year, maybe 2. Then I'll leave her. Amelia, I hate seeing you with her. It kills me. Mark, it's all for us, my love. Think of the end game. She won't suspect a thing. She's too trusting. I had to put my hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. It wasn't just an affair. It was a long con. They were after my money. The inheritance my grandparents had left me. The money that was supposed to be the down payment on our future home. Our family home. It was all a lie. My entire relationship with Mark, my entire life, was built on a foundation of deceit. He didn't love me. He had never loved me. He was using me. And my own sister, my maid of honor, was his accomplice. I kept scrolling, my fingers moving mechanically. I found their conversation from the morning of the wedding. Amelia, I can't do this. I can't stand there and watch you marry my sister. Mark, you have to. Stay strong, I'll give you a sign. At the altar. So you know I'm thinking of you. It'll be our secret. The wink. It was a sign. A promise. A secret message of their love delivered during his vows to me. I felt a visceral, physical sickness. I ran to the bathroom and threw up, bile and mai tais and the utter poison of their betrayal burning my throat. When I was done, I leaned against the cool tile floor, gasping for air. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave that threatened to drown me. But underneath the grief, something else was stirring. A cold, hard knot of rage. They thought I was too trusting. They thought I was a fool. They had underestimated me. I went back to the laptop. I took out my phone and I started taking pictures. Pictures of every single message. The pet names, the complaints about me, the plans for my money, the promise of a secret sign. I documented everything. I emailed the photos to a new, secret email address I created right then and there. I sent them to my best friend for safekeeping. I created a digital fortress of their betrayal. When I was finished, I closed the laptop and put it back in his bag. I deleted the new email account from my phone's history. I wiped my tears and washed my face. I crawled into the bed next to the man who had destroyed my life. He was snoring softly, oblivious. He looked so peaceful. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of pain and fury. The honeymoon was over. My mission had just begun. They had a plan. Now, so did I. And mine was going to be better. Returning home was surreal. The apartment we had shared, once a place of comfort and love, now felt like a stage set for a play I no longer wanted to be in. Every object, every photograph, held a double meaning. The smiling picture of the 3 of us on a hiking trip last summer, Mark, Amelia, and me, now looked like a portrait of a predator, his accomplice, and their prey. I saw the way his arm was around my shoulder, but his body was angled slightly towards her. I saw the look they were sharing over my head. The clues had been there all along. I just hadn't known how to read them. I moved through the first few weeks like a robot, going through the motions of a new wife. I cooked dinner. I asked about his day at work. I smiled when he kissed me goodbye in the morning. But on the inside, I was a different person. I was cold, calculating, and patient. The rage that had ignited in that Hawaiian hotel room had cooled into a solid core of purpose. Grief was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. Justice was the only thing that mattered. My investigation became more systematic. The text messages were the emotional proof, but I knew that to truly dismantle their plan, I needed to follow the money. Their entire scheme hinged on my inheritance. I had to protect it, and I had to find out how much damage they had already done. I told Mark I wanted to take a more active role in our finances. I framed it as wanting to be a better partner, to share the burden of managing our money. He was thrilled. He probably thought it meant I was becoming more invested in our future, the fake future he was selling me. He readily gave me all the passwords to our joint bank accounts, our credit cards, our investment portfolio. He had no idea he was handing me the keys to his own destruction. I started spending my evenings not watching movies with my husband, but hunched over my laptop, a spreadsheet open on the screen. I downloaded 2 years of statements from every account. I went through them line by line, transaction by transaction. It was tedious, painstaking work. But with every questionable charge I found, my resolve hardened. I created categories: Mark's personal spending, groceries, utilities, and a new one I labeled suspicious. The suspicious column started to grow alarmingly fast. There were hotel bookings in cities he had supposedly visited for solo work trips. There were expensive dinners at fancy restaurants I had never been to. There were purchases from a high-end jewelry store, a delicate gold necklace, a pair of diamond earrings, gifts I had never received. I cross-referenced the dates of these purchases with the text messages I had photographed. It was a perfect match. The hotel in Chicago was from the weekend he told me he was at a conference. The messages from that weekend showed him and Amelia talking about how much fun they were having, how they wished they didn't have to hide. "Room service again?" she had texted him, with a winking emoji. The necklace was for her birthday. He had told me he was working late that night. In reality, he was celebrating with my sister, using our joint money to buy her presents. The betrayal was deeper and more methodical than I could have ever imagined. This wasn't just a passionate affair. It was a calculated, long-term financial drain. He was siphoning our shared resources to fund a secret life with my sister. My money. The money I had brought into this marriage. One night, I confronted him, but not in the way he would expect. I kept it small, a test. I was sitting at the kitchen table, my laptop open, when he came home from work. "Hey, honey," I said, looking up with a manufactured smile. "I was just going through our credit card statement. I saw this charge for a restaurant. La Belle Vie. I don't remember us going there. Was that a work dinner?" He froze for a split second, his briefcase still in his hand. I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes before he masked it. "Oh yeah," he said, nodding. "That was with the team from the Henderson account. A celebratory dinner. I must have forgotten to tell you." Another easy lie. Another thread in the tapestry of his deceit. I already knew the truth. I had seen the texts from that night. He had taken Amelia there for their unofficial anniversary. "That's nice," I said, closing the laptop. "I'm glad it went well." I didn't push it. I didn't challenge him. I just filed away the lie. It was another piece of evidence, another nail for his coffin. I was learning his patterns. He was a confident liar because he had never been caught. He believed he was smarter than me. That was going to be his downfall. The next step was to deal with Amelia. Seeing her was agony. Our family was close, so avoiding her was impossible. A few weeks after the wedding, my mom hosted a family dinner. Amelia was there, looking happy and relaxed. She hugged me, telling me how wonderful it was to see me. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I played my part. I asked about her new apartment, the one I now suspected Mark had helped her pay for. "It's so exciting," I said with false enthusiasm. "How did you manage it? I know you were saving, but a down payment is so much." She smiled, a little too brightly. "Oh, I got a little help. My savings, plus a small loan from a friend." "A friend?" I asked, keeping my tone light and curious. "Anyone I know?" Her smile faltered. "No, just an old friend from college. Very generous." I watched her, and I watched Mark, who was pretending to be engrossed in a conversation with my dad across the room, but his eyes kept darting towards us. They were both terrible actors when you knew what to look for. The lies were piling up. Every conversation was a minefield of deceit. I felt like I was living in a house of mirrors, where nothing was as it seemed. The strain was immense. I had nightmares every night. I lost weight. My friends told me I had that newlywed glow, not realizing it was the feverish sheen of rage and sleeplessness. My best friend Sarah was the only person who knew the truth. I had called her the day after I discovered the messages, sobbing down the phone. She was my anchor in the storm. "What are you going to do?" She asked me one afternoon as we sat in a quiet coffee shop. "I'm going to expose them," I said, my voice low and determined. "But I have to be smart about it. I can't just accuse them. They'll deny everything and paint me as crazy. I need undeniable proof, financial proof, something a lawyer can use." "And then what?" she asked gently. "Then I'm going to take back everything they stole from me," I said, stirring my coffee, the spoon clinking against the porcelain. "My money, my dignity, my life. I'm going to leave him with nothing. And her, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who she is." Sarah nodded, her eyes full of concern. "Just be careful, Clara. You're playing with fire." "I know," I replied, looking out the window at the people passing by, all living their normal, uncomplicated lives. But I'm the one who was burned. It's time they felt the heat. I had my emotional proof and a growing pile of financial evidence. But I was still missing the smoking gun, the one big transaction that would tie it all together. I knew it had to be related to my inheritance. According to the terms of my grandparents' trust, a significant portion of my inheritance was released to me upon marriage. It was a substantial amount of money, deposited into our joint savings account just a week after the wedding. This, I now understood, was the event Mark and Amelia had been waiting for. This was the end game he had mentioned in his texts. I focused my search on that savings account. The statements were mostly straightforward. The large deposit from the trust, and a few small transfers to our checking account for bills. But then I saw it. A single massive withdrawal. A wire transfer for $50,000 made just 3 days after my inheritance was deposited. The description was vague. Investment transfer. My blood ran cold. I had never authorized an investment transfer. Mark handled our investments, but he always discussed them with me first. He had never mentioned this. $50,000. It was a huge chunk of the money. Where had it gone? I knew confronting him directly was a bad idea. He would just create a new lie, produce some fake documents, and cover his tracks. I needed to find out where that money went without him knowing I was looking. The bank statement only showed that it was a wire transfer. It didn't show the destination account. I called the bank, pretending to be doing some financial housekeeping. "Hi," I said, my voice bright and cheerful. "I was just reviewing our savings account and I saw a large transfer from a few months ago. It's listed as an investment transfer, and I can't for the life of me remember what it was for. Could you give me some more details on where that went?" The customer service representative was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but for security reasons, I can't disclose the full details of the recipient account over the phone. We can mail you a copy of the wire transfer confirmation, which will have all the information." "That would be great," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "Could you send it to our address on file?" "Of course," she said. "It should arrive in 5 to 7 business days." 5 to 7 business days. It felt like a lifetime. Now I had to play a new, dangerous game. Intercepting the mail. Mark usually got the mail on his way in from work. I had to get to it first. For the next week, I worked from home, my ears trained on the sound of the mail carrier's truck. Every day, around 2 in the afternoon, I would race down to the mailbox, my heart pounding. I sorted through the junk mail and bills, my hands searching for a plain white envelope from the bank. For 4 days, nothing. I was starting to lose hope. Maybe he had been clever enough to have it sent to a different address. But on the 5th day, there it was. A simple, unassuming envelope with the bank's logo in the corner. I ripped it open right there in the lobby of our apartment building. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The wire transfer confirmation. It listed the date, the amount, and the originating account. And then, at the bottom, the recipient information. My eyes scanned the page and then they locked on the name. It wasn't a brokerage firm. It wasn't an investment company. It was a person. The recipient was Amelia Collins, my sister. The paper trembled in my hand. $50,000, wired directly from our joint savings account, from my inheritance money to my sister's personal bank account. There was no ambiguity, no room for excuses. This was it. The smoking gun. The undeniable, irrefutable proof of their grand betrayal. I looked at the date of the transfer. Then I remembered a conversation from a few weeks ago. Amelia, bubbling with excitement, had announced that she had finally bought her own apartment, a beautiful little one-bedroom condo in a trendy part of the city. Everyone had been so proud of her, so impressed with her financial discipline. "I saved for years," she had said, beaming. My parents had praised her for being so responsible. It was all a lie. She hadn't saved for it. I had paid for it. My inheritance, the money my grandparents had wanted me to use to build a life, had been used to buy a love nest for my husband and my sister. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The shock and the pain were still there, but they were now overshadowed by a cold, clear certainty. I had them. I had everything I needed. The texts proved their intent. The credit card statements proved their secret life. And this wire transfer proved their crime. It wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was theft. Grand larceny. I went back up to the apartment and scanned the document. I saved it to my secret email account, along with all the other evidence. I then shredded the original paper into 1,000 tiny pieces and disposed of them in a public trash can miles from our home. No trace. That night, Mark came home from work, kissed me on the cheek, and asked what was for dinner. I looked at him, at his handsome, smiling face, and I felt nothing. No love, no sadness, just a profound and chilling emptiness. He was a stranger living in my house, eating my food, sleeping in my bed. A parasite. "I was thinking of having a big family dinner soon," I said, my voice even and pleasant. "Maybe to celebrate Mom and Dad's anniversary next month. We could host it here." His face lit up. "That's a great idea, babe. It'll be fun." "Yes," I said, turning back to the stove. "I think it will be." He had no idea what he was agreeing to. He thought he was coming to a party. He had no idea he was the guest of honor at his own execution. The stage was set. The evidence was gathered. All I had to do now was wait for the perfect moment to burn their world to the ground. The month leading up to my parents' anniversary dinner was the longest of my life. I was living a double life, and the strain was immense. By day, I was Clara, the loving wife, planning a beautiful celebration for her parents. I discussed menus with my mother. I ordered flowers. I sent out invitations. I even sat with Mark and Amelia to coordinate a joint gift. The three of us huddled together on the sofa like the happy family we were pretending to be. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. By night, I was a different person. I was a prosecutor building her case. I organized my evidence into a neat chronological file. I printed out the most damning text messages, the credit card statements with the incriminating purchases highlighted in yellow, and of course, the wire transfer confirmation. I made multiple copies of everything. One set for the dinner, one for my lawyer, and one hidden away in a safe deposit box. I left nothing to chance. I met with a divorce lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davis. I laid out the whole story from the wink at the altar to the $50,000 transfer. I showed her the folder of evidence. She read through it all, her expression growing more grim with each page. When she was finished, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and professional admiration. "This is one of the most calculated cases of financial infidelity I have ever seen," she said. "The emotional betrayal is horrific, but the financial evidence is ironclad. He didn't just cheat on you, Mr. Evans and your sister conspired to commit fraud and theft." She explained my legal options. We could sue for the return of the $50,000 plus damages. The evidence was so strong that she was confident we would win. The divorce proceedings would be heavily in my favor. I would likely be awarded a significant portion of our marital assets, given his egregious conduct. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want to confront them first," I said. "I want to do it publicly. I want our family to know exactly what they did." Ms. Davis raised an eyebrow. "A public confrontation can be messy. It could backfire." "I'm aware of the risks," I said, my voice firm. "But this wasn't just about money. They tried to humiliate me. They tried to make a fool out of me. They won't get to hide in the shadows. They need to be exposed. After that, you can file everything." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But be smart about it. Stick to the facts. The financial facts are your strongest weapon. Don't let it devolve into a screaming match." Her words echoed in my mind as the day of the dinner approached. Stick to the facts. The facts were my shield and my sword. The night of the party arrived. Our apartment was filled with people. My parents, my aunts and uncles, cousins, and a few close family friends. Mark was the perfect host, charming and attentive, refilling glasses and making sure everyone was comfortable. Amelia was there, helping me in the kitchen, acting the part of the devoted sister. "Everything looks amazing, Clara," she said, arranging appetizers on a platter. "You've really outdone yourself." "I wanted it to be a special night," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. I looked at her, my sister, who had betrayed me in the most profound way imaginable. There was no hint of guilt in her eyes, only a serene confidence. They really believed they had gotten away with it. Dinner was a lively affair. Toasts were made to my parents. Stories were shared. Laughter filled the room. I sat at the head of the table next to Mark, playing my role. I smiled, I laughed. I ate. But inside, I was a coiled spring, every nerve ending buzzing with anticipation. After the main course was cleared, as people were enjoying their dessert and coffee, I knew it was time. I stood up, tapping my glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. The chatter died down. All eyes turned to me. "I'd like to say a few words," I began, my voice clear and steady. Mark smiled at me, a proud, encouraging smile. He thought I was going to give a sentimental speech about our parents. "We're all here to celebrate 40 years of marriage," I continued, looking at my parents. "A partnership built on love, trust, and honesty. And it's made me think a lot about what makes a marriage work. It's about being a team, about transparency, especially when it comes to finances." I saw a flicker of confusion on Mark's face. This was not the speech he was expecting. Amelia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "For example," I said, my voice taking on a harder edge, "if one partner were to make a large financial decision, like, say, an investment, they would discuss it with the other partner. Isn't that right, Mark?" I turned to him. The spotlight was now on him. He forced a laugh. "Of course, honey. Teamwork makes the dream work, right?" "Right," I said, my smile not reaching my eyes. "So, I was a little confused when I was looking at our savings account recently. You know, the one where my inheritance money was deposited. I saw a $50,000 wire transfer for an investment. I don't remember us discussing a $50,000 investment. Can you remind me what that was for?" The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Mark's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Was it stocks? Bonds?" I pressed, my voice deceptively sweet. "I'd love to know how our investment is doing." It was a tech startup," he stammered, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape. "A friend of a friend. High risk, high reward. I was going to surprise you when it paid off." The lie was weak, pathetic. He was cornered, and he knew it. "A tech startup," I repeated slowly. I reached under the table and pulled out a thin folder. I opened it and took out a single sheet of paper. "That's funny, because this is a copy of the wire transfer confirmation from the bank. And it says the money wasn't sent to a tech startup. It was sent to a personal bank account." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. I looked directly at my sister, whose face was now ashen. It was sent to you, Amelia. A collective gasp went through the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father stared, speechless. Amelia shook her head, her eyes wide with fake disbelief. What? No, that's a mistake. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? I said, my voice dripping with ice. You don't know anything about the $50,000 that landed in your account on March 12th? The exact same day you made the down payment on your new apartment? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet, factual delivery of the information was more devastating than any scream. I placed the paper on the table for everyone to see. Mark finally found his voice. Clara, this is insane. You're making things up. This is a private financial matter. It stopped being a private matter when you used my inheritance to fund your affair with my sister. The words were out, sharp and venomous. The final, ugly truth was laid bare on the dinner table, right next to the dessert plates. The room erupted. My mother started to cry. Mark's parents looked at him with horror. An affair? My father boomed, his voice shaking with rage. What is she talking about, Mark? She's lying. She's hysterical, Mark shouted, standing up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. Am I? I said, my voice dangerously quiet again. I reached into the folder and pulled out another stack of papers, the printed text messages. Then maybe you can explain these. Messages between you and Amelia. Planning this. Planning to use my money to build a life together. Or maybe you can explain the wink at our wedding. The secret sign you promised her at the altar so she'd know you were thinking of her while you were saying your vows to me. I threw the papers on the table. They scattered across the white tablecloth like poison confetti. No one needed to read them. The truth was written all over Mark's and Amelia's faces. Guilt, panic, utter abject terror. They were exposed, caught in the brilliant, unforgiving light of their own lies. Amelia burst into tears, a pathetic gulping sound. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean for this to happen. You didn't mean to steal $50,000? I shot back, my control finally snapping. You didn't mean to sleep with your sister's husband? You didn't mean to help him plan this whole thing? Which part was the accident? Amelia? She just cried harder, burying her face in her hands. Mark stood there, speechless, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine hatred in his eyes. He wasn't sorry. He was just sorry he got caught. My work was done. The truth was out. The family celebration had turned into a tribunal, and the guilty parties had been convicted. I looked around at the shocked faces of my family. I felt a strange, hollow victory. I had won. I had exposed them. But the cost was immense. My family was broken. My marriage was a pile of ashes. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving the chaos behind me. I went into my bedroom and closed the door, the sound of shouting and crying muffled behind it. I had done what I set out to do. The fallout was just beginning. But my part in the drama was over. I had burned their world down. Now it was time to build my own, far away from the wreckage. The immediate aftermath was a storm of raw emotion. I could hear my father's voice, a low roar I hadn't heard since I was a teenager, demanding that Mark get out of my house. I heard my mother's heartbroken sobs, a sound that cut through me despite my anger. I heard Mark's parents apologizing profusely, their voices thick with shame for their son's actions. I stayed in the bedroom, listening to the implosion of my family. It was the ugliest, most painful sound I had ever heard. After what felt like an eternity, there was a soft knock on my door. Clara, it's Mom. I opened the door. Her face was tear-streaked and pale. She looked 10 years older than she had 2 hours ago. She pulled me into a hug, a fierce, protective embrace. I am so sorry. She whispered into my hair. I can't believe it. My own daughter. She was talking about Amelia, and the fresh wave of betrayal in her voice was palpable. They're gone, she said, pulling back to look at me. Your father made them leave. Both of them. We sat on the edge of my bed, the bed I had shared with a monster. For a long time, we didn't speak. The silence was heavy with everything that had been said and everything that was still to come. What happens now? She finally asked. Now I get my life back, I said, my voice flat but firm. I've already spoken to a lawyer. She's filing for divorce first thing in the morning, and we're suing them for the money they stole. My mother nodded, her eyes filled with a sad resolve. Good. They deserve whatever they get. Your father, I don't think he'll ever speak to Amelia again. The finality of her words hit me. I had lost a sister. It didn't matter that she had betrayed me. The hole she left in my life was real, a phantom limb that would ache for a long time. But it was a necessary amputation. The limb was poisoned, and it would have eventually killed me. The next few days were a blur of legalities and logistics. Ms. Davis filed the divorce papers, citing adultery and financial fraud. Mark was served at his office, a public humiliation that I took a small, grim satisfaction in. He moved out of the apartment while I was staying with my parents, leaving his keys on the counter. He took only his clothes. He knew better than to try and take anything else. The locks were changed the same day. The lawsuit for the $50,000 was filed against both him and Amelia. Their treachery was now a matter of public record. The news spread like wildfire through our extended family and social circles. People took sides. Most were on mine, shocked and appalled by what Mark and Amelia had done. But a small minority of my mother's relatives, tried to preach forgiveness. She's still your sister, one aunt told me over the phone. No, I replied coldly. She's the woman who conspired with my husband to steal my inheritance. The biological connection is irrelevant. I hung up the phone and blocked her number. I was building walls, high and strong, and there was no room for enablers inside them. A week later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Amelia. Her voice was small and shaky, stripped of all its previous confidence. Clara, please, she began. Can we just talk? There's nothing to talk about, Amelia, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I know I messed up, she cried. I know it was wrong, but I love him. I couldn't help it. Her words were a slap in the face. She wasn't apologizing for betraying me. She was defending her love for him. You didn't just fall in love, I said, my voice dangerously low. You planned, you lied, you stole. You stood next to me at my wedding, knowing you were sleeping with the groom and plotting to take my money. That isn't love, Amelia. That's a sickness. What do you want from me? She sobbed. I'll pay you back. I'll sell the apartment. You will sell the apartment, I corrected her, because my lawyer is going to make sure of it. This isn't a negotiation. This is a consequence. You and Mark made your choices. Now you get to live with them. Goodbye, Amelia. I ended the call and blocked her number too. It was a small, decisive action, but it felt like severing the final thread that connected us. She was no longer my problem. The legal battle was surprisingly swift. Faced with the mountain of undeniable evidence, Mark and Amelia had no choice but to settle. They agreed to pay back the full $50,000 plus my legal fees. Amelia had to sell her precious condo, the one bought with my blood money. Mark's finances were ruined. He had to cash out his retirement savings to pay his share. The divorce was finalized in record time. I was free. I sold the apartment, the one filled with too many ghosts. I couldn't stand to be there anymore. I used the money from the sale and the money they paid back to buy a small house in a different part of the state, closer to my friend Sarah. It was a fresh start, a clean slate. My relationship with my parents slowly began to heal. They were heartbroken over what Amelia had done, but they were steadfast in their support for me. They never once asked me to reconcile with her. They had chosen their side, and it was mine. I heard through the grapevine that Mark and Amelia were still together, trying to make a life out of the ashes of the one they had torched. They were pariahs. Mark lost his job when the scandal became office gossip. Amelia was ostracized by the family. They were living in a small, rented apartment, struggling to make ends meet. They had gotten what they wanted, each other, but it had cost them everything. Their reputations, their financial stability, and their family. One evening, about a year later, I was sitting on the porch of my new house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. It was a screenshot of a social media post. It was a picture of Mark and Amelia. They had just gotten married at a courthouse. She was wearing a simple dress. He was in a rumpled suit. They were smiling for the camera, but their eyes looked tired. The caption read, "Mr. and Mrs. Evans. Against all odds, love wins." I looked at the picture for a long time. A year ago, it would have sent me into a spiral of rage and pain. But now, I felt nothing. Just a distant clinical pity. They could call it love if they wanted to. They could pretend they were star-crossed lovers who had triumphed over adversity. But I knew the truth. They were just two thieves who had gotten caught. They had promised to love each other forever. I looked out at the peaceful evening sky, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves in the trees. They could have their forever. I was more interested in my tomorrow. They wanted to share a husband. Now they could share the blame. And I was finally, beautifully and completely free of them both.